My name is Sebastian. I'm a workstation specialist at Lenovo, national workstation specialist. What the national audit means is that I have customers in DC, in the Maritimes, and I don't sleep a lot. Other than that, I've been at Lenovo since 2005, and for the last 6 years, I've been managing a lot of the business for the workstation. So the strategy, the go-to-market, and also some of the training, obviously. So the agenda I have for you today will be split into a few sections. So first of all, the use case, the way that typically we go and configure and size workstation needs, because they're a bit different than what we would do for a traditional, let's call it, laptop, desktop. The before versus the now, because some of the things changed a bit and it became a little bit more complex, but that's okay. It gives us a bit more insight. We have a bit more opportunities to do exactly what we need to do with the workstation, but it's a little bit more complex than it used to be. So I like to do how we used to do it and then how we're doing it right now, which is also going to change obviously over the time. Some budget-friendly solutions. Good news is because of those new technologies, sometimes the price go up. I'm sure you've all heard probably RAM is going up this year, storage is going up this year. But there are other advantages to having new technology come in where we can shift sometimes from a product category to another, and it can help us, lower the cost of acquisition in certain cases. Remote workstation versus AI, that's a big part of it, the new part of the workstation landscape for 2024, 2025, brought to us a lot by COVID, and then just closing a few thoughts, questions. So first of all, sizing questions, sizing use cases, and that's really the name of the game. When we're talking about a workstation request or a workstation need, the landscape, it changed a lot. So we were, one computer really easy. Sometimes we had to put a graphics card or an accelerator into an old system. That was pretty easy. Now we have sentient machines. Okay, maybe not sentient machines, but we have quite a bit of options available to us. So we have more than one machine, and there's going to be use case for all of them, and it's going to be either for budget, it's going to be for performance, it's going to be for ISV certification. There's going to be a lot of reasons why you go to one or the other. So the main question is going to be, what is the system going to be used for? Seems trivial enough, but most of the requests I get typically in a weekly basis is going to be about, here's the machine I have, what is available today? And that is the wrong question. We should never start with what I'm using today. I should not start either with what is my budget. I will never ask the budget first. It's important, we'll get to that, but if I start with the budget, I might throw myself into a corner and I don't have the proper solution. At least I want to make sure that my customer knows what the right solution is going to be, the perfect solution is going to be, then the most optimized solution is going to be, and then we can work towards a budget-friendly option. So that's the best use case in the mindset in which we need to go when we're sizing workstation typically. A bit like we would do for a server, which is more specialized. So how we used to do it in the past, and the past is a few years ago, it's pretty recent still. 3 questions: what is the application? Single-threaded or multi-threaded, we'll get into that, and the GPU requirement. So that's typically the way we used to do it. You give me those 3 questions, I can size a workstation for the use case, then for the budget, everybody's happy. It was pretty simple. What software? Why does it matter? Because first of all, software is going to behave differently depending on what it is, but also because sometimes I need to have an ISV certification. ISV certification, that stands for independent software vendor. That would be your CATIA, your Autodesk, anybody that creates the software that we will be using to drive a business. So this is absolutely important because, for example, if I use an Autodesk product, like AutoCAD, for example, and I have a GeForce graphics card, it is not officially supported by Autodesk. So I might call because I have somebody or something weird happening on screen, and Autodesk is going to say, well, you're SOL because you don't have something that I support. This is not the right driver set, this is not the right type of graphics card. So we need to make sure we're in tune to whatever we need to do and accelerate from a workload perspective. So software, very important. Single-threaded or multi-threaded. Inherently, some of the workloads have to be sequential. CAD is maybe the one that's most widely known. The reason why CAD is single-threaded is because it's waiting on an input. I'm talking about the modelization part of it. So when I'm in the viewport, I'm adding some polygons, moving around, I'm switching things around. It is waiting for my mouse input to change the view. So it needs to have this, to register it, to send the command to the graphics card, to load whatever you need from the memory to the video memory of the graphics card if it's not already there. So it's quite a bit of sequential. It's waiting for me to do something before it does anything. Because of that, I need to have the fastest possible processor. I don't care about 30 cores. I don't care about 64 cores. I want to have 2 to 4, just so that we can feed Windows in the background and all the other processes that are running. But for CAD, I need 2 really fast ones, and that's what's important to me for CAD. But then, and this is why I like this example, this is SolidWorks. All of them, all of them, it's 2. Those 2 examples are SolidWorks. So one is going to be the development part of it, the modelization part of it, and the other part is the CAD, the simulation, or the rendering of the actual 3D part. That uses quite a bit of cores on the processor, and that's when you're going to see those 16 cores, 32 cores, 64 cores come into play. But then what that did previously, as I was mentioning, is it did separate what we were going for as a solution. So initially, when we were doing CAD, the question I would ask, okay, you're doing CAD, perfect. Are you doing a lot of simulation? Are you doing a lot of rendering? Or is it more about the modelization of the part? Modelization of the part, good. We're gonna go with a P3 tower. That's a workstation, you're in luck. It's the entry from a price perspective. And then for cores and simulation, then we would go to a completely different machine. So we have a separation of the solution. That's in the past, we'll get where we're going later. GPU comparison, I created that chart because there's a lot of confusion about the performance of a graphics card being tied to video memory. So the idea is to, and I've color coded these by row. So if you look at the first row here, CUDA core, you'll see that the one with the most CUDA core is going to be the RTX 6000 ADA currently. And the most amount of memory, of video memory, or frame buffer if you want to call it that, it's still the RTX 6000 ADA. But then, if I look at the Fastmark core, which is a way to grade the performance of a graphics card, I get that the RTX 4080, which is a consumer gaming graphics card with only 16 gigs of VRAM, so the fourth of the 6000 ADA, is actually outperforming it. So we need to be very conscious about what we're trying to accelerate and what we need. Video memory is like regular memory, like RAM that you're going to get into a system. If I have 64 gigs but I use only 8, it's not giving me any benefit. As long as I have enough, I'm good. I'm not getting into the channels of memory for that example, but this is just really high level example. As long as I have enough, usually I'm okay. I need to plan for the future, of course, but I don't need to have twice as much video memory to be twice as effective. It doesn't work that way. So let's make sure that when we look at the graphics card, we size it correctly for the ISV certification, but also for the price performance that we need to get. So that's the other part about the GPU. But those 3 questions were essentially 90% of sizing a workstation 3 years ago. So how about now, where maybe my office doesn't look quite that way. Thankfully, I don't either. So what is the application? So those would be today's questions. Augmented by these. Number of PCIe lanes, desktop to mobile, data location, AI workload, and we're going back to that single thread, multi-threaded. Why? Let's start with that one actually. This was the example I gave before. I had a separation. So I want to do modelization, I want to do simulation. I had to choose because one was really a lot better at doing one of these jobs. What is happening now is we do have something that just came out this year. It's the ThinkStation P8. ThinkStation P8 uses the AMD Threadripper architecture. You'll see exactly why on the next slide. It is quite a bit more powerful and allows me to bridge I still won't use that system everywhere. Can it do everything? Yeah, it can do pretty much everything. It is incredibly fast. It has a lot of cores if I wanted to, but it's also more expensive. So when we get to that final budget phase, a lot of the time I'm gonna go with the P3 Tower for CAD application or something where I need to lower the cost of ownership of the system. But still, this is a brand new system, PCI Gen 5, ready for a few years still, because, for example, you see PCI Gen 5. What we don't see on that chart is the other storage options we have. This is compatible with U.3 right now, which is 15 terabyte of data in a PCI Gen 4 connectivity. But it's also compatible with E.3, and E.3 is going to be PCI Gen 5. So you get quite a bit more. But if you look at those speeds, so for example, 4.7 gigahertz base clock, and base clock means that whatever you do for an extended period of time, you won't go below that ever. And that's the main thing, because sometimes there's so much marketing behind all of the CPU these days. It's a boost clock, it's a turbo clock. That's good. That's a good indication of what you're gonna do for a short burst. But for a long period of time, when you're doing crunching and simulation for hours, that's not what you're gonna be getting. You're not gonna be getting that turbo speed. You're not gonna be getting 5.3 gigahertz in a sustained mode. But as long as you're making sure that your base clock is high, your performance is gonna be double what it used to be. Because typically we're going with something, oh, the turbo is good. Look at the base clock. Very important. Point I'm making is the P8 is able to sustain that clock. So it's giving you something that's very predictable in terms of performance. Single thread, multi-thread. PCI Express, who here knows about PCI Express lanes and why they're important? It's normal because I'm making it up. No, I'm not. So PCI Express lanes, what they are is basically the highway on your computer. And what we don't typically know is for a Core i7, Core i9, which everybody knows, we have 20 of those. Seems like a lot. How many lanes do I need to power one graphics card?
16.
That's right, 16. So 16 for one graphics card. Then I have my M.2 PCI Express storage. That's 4. That's 20. I'm done. Okay. I'm not going to use those completely, 100% all the time. That's for sure. But then it doesn't leave me quite a lot to be able to do something that's very demanding and not have collisions and not have slow down. So if I want to make sure that I'm using my hardware 100% of the time, I need more lanes. So that's when we're moving to a Threadripper Pro. That's when we're moving to a Xeon processor, either the 2400 series, 3400 series, or even the scalable processor that we have in the ThinkStation P10, for example. So with that, let's get into some budget-friendly options. So there are multiple. We are Intel, not only Intel friendly, we're mostly Intel. It's the vast majority of our portfolio. From a budget-friendly option, something like a P14S AMD, which is brand new, it's not even out yet. I might be disclosing here something that's not being announced yet. So this is going to be a really nice replacement for something like a T-Series, if you're at all familiar with the regular lineup of Lenovo laptops. But something that's going to give us a little bit more performance, quite a bit more performance, expandability from a memory perspective, and that's one way sometimes to just shift and making sure that we have something that will be supported. That's ISV certified by Autodesk, for example, even with that integrated chipset. But it's giving me something that will be a little bit easier to integrate for multiple type of users. So I will have that for some of my low-end AutoCAD users, but I will also have that for somebody that's doing very intensive Excel and needs to have 48 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of RAM. I can configure them, have one fleet that's the same across all the organization, but I will have one image to manage, but I can customize depending on the RAM, that sort of thing. So greater flexibility. The new processors that AMD is coming out with this year also have an NPU, which is not special to AMD. They were the first to do it. They did it last year, actually. So if you have an AMD processor, 7000 series, you have an NPU already. So you can benefit from that. But this is just a bit higher in terms of the tops that we can do with that processor, and just giving you better flexibility for the price. Very impressive for the price what we can do with the P14S Gen 5 AMD. From an Intel perspective, the game is completely different because this year we're moving to the Core Ultra. The Core Ultra is, and I'll show you with a benchmark, I think it's the next slide. This is not, if you look at the specs, this is not absolutely new. It's a brand new redesign, it's a new chassis, it's aluminum based, it's dual fan design for the cooling. There's an RTX 500 Ada, it will become important later. Nothing is soldered from the RAM, it's not soldered for the storage obviously, but why is it interesting from a Core Ultra perspective?
On the S series, it's not soldered either?
Exactly, not this year. So this year we removed the soldering, really happy about that. I hate soldered RAM. So usually we didn't have it. If it was a workstation, you didn't have soldered RAM. That changed last year for LPDDR. Cost reasons, performance reasons, but yeah, so really happy about that. 1370p, that would be a Core i7 that you would typically see in that type of laptop. If you look at the performance rating, it's about 20,000 fastmark score. If you look at the 13700H, this is something that would be in the higher mobile workstation. So quite a bit more expensive, bigger in terms of size and weight for a workstation. But then you get into the Core Ultra, okay, I get a better chassis, smaller chassis, something that is better eco-friendly as well because it's recycled aluminum, which is recyclable indefinitely as opposed to plastic, which has, you know, an end to when you can recycle plastic. Much better system, smaller system, easier to carry and to go on a plane with, for example, trying to work with that little shelf. So you can effectively replace a higher spec mobile workstation of today with the entry mobile workstation. Point I'm making, this is a really good solution to try and cut on cost and transition. So if you have an H class, by all means, ask for a demo. We do have demo systems, so you can have it for 30 days. And that way, it's helping you, making sure you're sizing correctly for whatever you need, and maybe lowering the price a bit, or keeping it in check at the very least. So, really important. Another thing that's changed since COVID, during COVID I should say, but now it's really effective, we're seeing it quite a bit in the workstation world, is the data location and the remote users. So we didn't have a whole lot of remote users with workstations. It was skewed, I want to say 70%, 30%. So 70% desktop, 30% laptop, completely shifted. It's about 65, 35 right now. So mostly mobile. So why is it mostly mobile? Because of COVID, because everybody needed flexibility. They weren't sure where the users were going to be. I also have some customers that are hiring talent outside of the country, so they need to have a mobile. So the first thing is, okay, can we do mobile effectively? So if we're still in the sizing mode, let's look at the P520. That was a very valid, very high-end type workstation, desktop workstation I had in high-end engineering firms. W2245, which was an expensive processor, 8-core, 16 threads, very, very powerful, great graphics card. You see the type of specs. We don't see that, you know, for every users. Today we have the P16 Gen 2. P16 Gen 2 can scale up to 192 gigs of RAM. That's the most RAM you can get on a corporate workstation mobile laptop in the world right now. And you can get, what, more than twice, almost 3 times the CPU performance. Granted, that's because you have more cores on the mobile processor, which is weird to say that you have more cores on a mobile processor. But this is the tipping point where we started to see, okay, yeah, I can really effectively change the workload from a desktop to a mobile with that sort of performance. So this is one thing we can do. So if ever you're doubting, can I move to mobile? Am I gonna get a lot of pushback for the performance? Not at all. You can get quite a bit of really, really good feedback actually. But it also goes to the data center. So one thing I have from time to time, but it was very rare, was I need to rack those workstations in the data center. It was rare because I didn't have as many remote users back in the day. It's 4 years ago. But the other part is nobody in the data center wanted to have anything else than a server in the data center. Mostly true still. So we had to do quite a bit of work in the past few years. You're gonna be able to connect either with a solution like the Ultra that you see in the middle, which is a really small computer, 3.9 liters, remote connect with a laptop let's say I have something in the data center and I'm gonna remote connect with a laptop. I'm gonna use something like McDyne TGX, which is basically a remote connection system, but it will leverage the graphics card from the laptop and from the server. So that way I can do multiple 4K with a very low latency and a really high color profile. So we can do that, and you can use something like LeoStream. We're not affiliated with LeoStream, but we do use it in certain solutions indirectly, because LeoStream can allow you to do some brokering. So you will connect to LeoStream, it will find a McDyne TGX connection and assign you a system. In a world where we want to have a lot of machines in the data center, this becomes a really interesting solution. So we have several ways of doing workstation in the data center. One is one-to-one. One-to-one remote workstation, that is a really good solution for CAD. This one to the left. Then we have one-to-one remote workstation, but bigger workstations, like a ThinkStation P10 that can go up to 120 cores, that can go up to 2 terabytes of RAM, and 4 really high-end GPUs. It's basically a server, but it will be Windows 10 or 11. Microsoft wants me to say it's Windows 11 certified. It's Windows 11 certified, and it will just work with Client OS really, really well. That's the goal. Everything is racked. You can use it for simulation, something that requires a lot of compute. And then you have this one that's also very interesting. We do the solution using Linux. It's KVM, which is free. You can have virtual machines that you create really easily, and you could assign one graphics card per system. So you don't have to pay a vGPU license. You don't have to install anything else than your OS. So it would be Windows 10, it would be Linux, whatever, but you could do it all from that system. And the interesting part that you could do is you could have, for example, 4 users, 4 graphics card, all is well. Then at the end of the day, during the night, you can have one virtual machine that uses everything, all the resources of that system. And then you just do data crunching, you do simulation on it, so you have a multi-purpose type machine. So that's another way to do it. But one thing I want to make sure you leave with today is this solution, which is brand new, which is unique to the marketplace right now. So these are the P30 Ultras. They're, as I was saying, 3.9 liters. It's half of a small form factor. You can fit 7 of them on a rack, on that type of shelf. It's a rack that you can pull from your data center. So 7 of them in a 5U rack space, so you're lower than 1 U per user. You have incredibly good performance because you can scale up to 6 gigahertz in speed. You can scale up to RTX 4000 ADA generation small form factor. You have dual Ethernet ports. So you can do a really, really good CAD machine on that sort of system. So now, the argument against this would be, yeah, I don't want your filthy machines in my data center. And yeah, we might have run into this. So what we did, we created a PCI Express card that you can put into the system as well. And it's a BMC card. Out of band management, you can run it and manage it from your endpoint management for your servers, and you can manage those systems as well. So much easier from an administration perspective to manage client devices in a data center. We had to do something like that because we're at that inflection point where we have more client devices in the data center now than we ever did. So AI, that's accurate. That's where we're going. We know that's where we're going. But seriously, we all use AI every day. It's going to be through the application, it's going to be through Teams, it's going to be through the background removal, the noise removal aspect of it. So we use it from an inferencing perspective, all of us. And there's multiple parts to the AI that we use. Either it's going to be for training, not so much for the user, the general user, but for the inferencing, most definitely. So what we want to make sure is we have the workstations and the systems that can benefit from NPU acceleration and also GPU acceleration, because GPU is really good at inferencing. And to that note, we all hear a lot about NPUs. So NPUs to accelerate my local instance of Copilot. Because I don't know if you knew, but even though I have a GPU in my system, even though it's 9 to 12 times faster than my NPU-enabled system that I just got this year, Copilot Local is not leveraging the GPU at all. It's only looking for an NPU. The reverse is also true sometimes. So I have an NPU, yeah, I'm gonna save some battery life, that's good, because I don't have to leverage it off of my CPU. Not necessarily, because the software manufacturer might have not intended for it to be used with an NPU, but for the GPU to do it. So just something to keep in mind. We're in that weird space where everybody's doing AI, and there are some affiliations between Intel, Microsoft, NPU, that sort of thing, and AMD. I'm not gonna. So let's make sure that whatever we're trying to accelerate through a workstation, we know if it's NPU, we know if it's GPU, and for the time being, especially for the entry workstations, why not have both? Because your processor is gonna have it anyway. Let's make sure we have something like an RTX 500 data and benefit from 9 to 12 times the processing power, and 9 to 12 times the tops that we would be getting off of that NPU. So that's the interesting part about it. From a workstation perspective, that's where we fit. So the workstation can do inferencing really well. Does anybody know the difference between inferencing and training? So inferencing is a pre-trained neural network AI. So we have data scientists and they work on a neural network that will be able to recognize a chihuahua or a muffin. And that exists, that's been done. So, and look it up on Google, because it's not always easy. But you have a muffin or chihuahua, and that trained model is going to be able to make the difference between the two of them. And so that's inferencing. It's been trained, it knows, you just feed it data, spits out a result at the end. Training is going to be when you're trying to create that model. You're trying to create something to analyze, to be able to do rendering faster, that sort of thing. Large language models, you would need to train them first before you're able to use them. Stable image diffusion, same thing. So workstations, why they're important and interesting in that regard, because typically we speak about AI and the way we're going to do AI, and we tend to think, I'm going to do it in the cloud for flexibility and scalability. It's not wrong. I'm going to do it in a infrastructure environment because of the sheer calculation and power. That's absolutely true. But you need to get to that point. And I think it's 77% of the time a data scientist is going to spend is on data manipulation, on changing the stickers on the data on the end, changing the offsets of some of the layers in the neural network. That's 77% of his time. If he spends all of his time sending data to the cloud and downloading it, there are overage fees that come into play. One of our customers in the States, at one point during a month, he got an invoice he wasn't expecting, and it was for $5 million. And when you're not expecting $5 million and it comes on your doorstep, it's not a nice surprise. You can buy several workstations with a $5 million. In fact, they moved all their workload back to workstations. They paid for all the workstations in 8 months. So it's really valid. And then what we can do is, just move to a lot of these pre-trained applications that you can use to either develop yours, or just also, if you look at the type of applications that come into play, and you know those names like Google Bard, like GPT, but they're being integrated in all of our workflows, as long as we accept it and we're not signing our souls, which feels like it these days. But this is something that we need to plan for right now. We need to plan for this because we need a system that are going to be as efficient as possible. So we need those GPUs, we need those NPUs in certain cases. And why we want to go with a workstation is because we fail fast. We fail often. You want to fail as fast as possible when you're doing training for AI, because you want to correct that model as fast as possible. If you do it locally, you have plenty of performance, you have plenty of storage locally, you have those high-end GPUs. We can fit 4 GPUs into a P10 like this. So those RTX 6000 ADA, we can have 4 of them in a system like this, fully in the data center. Redundant power supply is also possible. So we're completely changing the game that way. Yes?
Can you connect multiple stations together? So you had that example of the 6 on that rack. Is the only limitation the rack space, or is there other limitations on the, like if you had like 8 or 9 of them? And I'm asking just because GPU, having that flexibility of GPU power and multiple GPUs in one system is a huge benefit. So.
Exactly. So you're gonna wanna have something, for example, this would be a completely different use case than the P3 Ultras, where we had 7 of them in a 5U rack space, because those Ultras would be more for CAD, single-threaded application mostly, and something that benefits from an RTX 4000 and below. This is much, much bigger. We're doing 192 gigs of VRAM in this system, 2 terabytes of RAM. It's completely different. And you're right, we want to centralize the data as much as possible so that we can get the fastest possible exchange between the RAM, between the storage, between the GPU and the VRAM. So that's what we're trying to do with something like the P10. But depending on the connectivity, yes, we have ConnectX 6 NIC cards that we can put into that system. So you can have a 25 gig network card in the system plus 4 times RTX 6000 ADA. So yeah, you're getting something that is very, very efficient from a pricing perspective, most definitely. No server is gonna come close to this because it's client-based. You don't pay for the licenses the same way you would pay for a server. Completely different. But this is one way to accelerate AI from a data scientist perspective and just go, beyond. Then you deploy to the cloud, then you deploy to your infrastructure. And we do have all those solutions to support, from really the pocket to the cloud is what we like to say, but really something like the P3 Tiny, which is a very, very small workstation, which actually, seeing it makes me think, I didn't put that into a cost-saving opportunity, but it definitely is. So that little device here, it's 1 liter, but can support a 65-watt CPU, so a Core i7 14900, let's say. Not the T variant, but the real one, plus a T1000 graphics card. I can do both in 1 liter form factor. So this would definitely be one that could do some processing at the edge, then send into my model for AI. I would use one of these for the processing of the data so that I can start having my AI model, and then moving to the infrastructure to be able to really go through that model. So really, that's not new. IT is evolving, workstations are evolving, the use cases are evolving as well. I think AI is going to be the most changing factor in the way we do business and the way we work every day. We're going to use it quite a bit more, and we're going to use AI tools to make AI tools, so we're going to need definitely to have the machines to support it and to be very flexible if we want with those type of machines. We need simplified solutions because you've seen the number of workstations. I think we have quite a bit more in terms of the type of devices we offer. It's becoming a zoo right now in the market. It's really difficult to make a choice. So it's important to have simplified solutions sometimes. So to have something like a P14S that I'm gonna decide, well, those users don't need the graphics card. That's okay. Those users, they need the graphics card. It's still a P14S. I need to have 16 gigs for some, 64 for some. It's always the same image, apart from maybe the GPU driver. So we can do simplified solutions to try and not lose our mind completely when we're sizing workstation needs. And we need, just efficiency. So the name of the game for workstation is efficiency. I want to make sure that I'm not it's easy to oversize. It's easy to say, okay, I'm just going to sell you a 6000 ADA. doesn't make any sense. We need to make sure that we're sizing for the proper need, and making sure that we're accelerating the workload correctly without breaking the bank. It's not the goal. Let's make sure that we have the proper solution, and that's where we stand. That's where I come in, and that's where you can hopefully contact me and we can work about a solution together. Any questions?
You mentioned a lot about the P14, P16. What about the P1? Where does
Yeah.
that fall in there?
P1 is actually going to be higher wattage, so it's going to give you more performance. That's a good question because we launched it yesterday, actually. So the P1 Gen 7, we call it the first, AI laptop that we've built because it has the NPUs on it, but it can go scale up past 300 tops. So we're talking about 16 tops on entry laptops. We can scale past 300 tops on the P1 Gen 7. Aluminum body, again, but really where it scales is I need to have something that's even more powerful. It's still going to be called Core Ultra, but I'm going to be able to push it just a bit more because I have more room to breathe, so to speak. I have more room to cool it down. And I'm going to have CAM memory, so I remove the latency quite a bit. Just completely premium feeling. This is what we use a lot. I see it as, the alternative. Somebody is used to Mac and can't go Mac, because I know I'm not changing anybody for Mac. I've tried. But this is the closest you're gonna get, really. Because of the feeling, because of what we use from the material, because of the performance, and just the way
How does
it's
the
balanced.
Gen 7 performance with the i9 Ultra compared to M3?
It should, from an AI perspective, it should be quite a bit more, a lot more. Like we're talking 40, 40 times. So it's quite a bit. But from a processing perspective, I wouldn't want to say it's 10 times as much as I would see in a Mac type keynote. That's what they would say, because I can't tell you exactly what the application is. So it will be true in certain cases, it won't be in certain. We would need to really look at it from the application that you're trying to accelerate. But I'm very confident in the performance of the P1 Gen 7. Definitely.
Just need to see the pricing for it.
Oh, it should be competitive.
What about cooling? Because the processor is more powerful, right? So it needs more better cooling.
Exactly. It has more heat pipes. It has that aluminum chassis as well, which helps for the dissipation of the heat. And it has those dual fan as well. So, of course, you can hear it a bit more. And that's one thing that we're running into these days is I hear the fans going, so it's overheating.
Yeah.
It's not, but it's kind of a byproduct of I'm cooling it effectively, hence the fan is running a little bit faster. I hear it, so it must be overheating, but it's performing exactly as it should. But yeah, we're in that weird range right now where we're trying to find, do we lower the performance 2, 3, 5%, but we keep it lower in terms of dB? And what is the perception of the performance? Is it better? Because it comes to performance. We've done it 2 generations ago, and the engineers in Japan didn't want to have a higher fan to go faster because of the dB. In retrospect, I think they were right because of that. Because they said, no, we don't want to go above a certain dB. We don't want to go above, I think it's 42. We said, well, if the user wants it, let's give them the choice to go up to 45.
How about something like Neptune, but it's
Oh.
in a smaller box, right?
Well,
Someday?
yes and no. Depends. When you have, so Neptune, for those who don't know, that's our warm water cooled servers. That's what DreamWorks Animation uses. And it's just very, very efficient. It's very precise in the way it needs to be installed and run, and the way we've engineered it is very secure. In a laptop, since these are mil-spec devices, I want them to be dropped on the floor. I want them, well, maybe not, but I want you to be able to do it. And there's no problem with it. That's the idea. So this is why these are still the most reliable laptops, workstation laptops in the world for years and years. from a independent type perspective where we look at the result. But as soon as I'm starting to have water cooled something, I can have issues. I'm seeing it with gaming systems. Sometimes the liquid, which is not supposed to have any type of degradation possible, it starts agglomerating and creating little bubbles, and then it's getting stuck, and then the system starts going from 35 Celsius to 65 idle. I don't want that. So that's the main thing. So for reliability, for longevity of the systems, to be able to work everywhere, we're not looking into water cooled. We have been using liquid metal though, and a lot of those. So liquid metal will just give you better contact with the die, and it gives you a better cooling solution. So that's what
If you compare AMD processor and Intel processor, which was smaller?
So from a battery perspective, I see that right now. I haven't benchmarked the Ultra just yet, but for the past 3 years, AMD was doing an incredible job. Better battery life. I had really good performance as well from AMD in the mobile world. I'm not getting lower energy consumption from the Threadripper. It's a 350 watt processor. It's a monster, but I'm getting better performance because it's able to get that 350 watt and dissipate it correctly and just do what it needs to do. So I have use cases. I wouldn't say I'm as fond of the graphics card, consumer graphics card for the time being with AMD. More for the driver solution, which is more changing a bit. So I wouldn't want my customers to have to play with driver set every single day. But apart from that, the CPU, I don't have any issues with. Actually, the opposite. It's really good. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.